What's up, Viola gang? I'm James, and this is my brother's cat, Sergey. Speaking of my brother, he was a very successful musician back in high school. Sergey, that's the camera. Anyways, well, he went to Allstate twice on viola. One year he was second chair, and the other year he was first chair. That's saying a lot because we're from Illinois, which has Chicago, so it was pretty competitive. But the thing was, he mainly performed on violin. People often bring up this kind of situation when comparing violinists and violists. They say it seems like every time a violinist plays viola, they immediately outdo all the violists. Some people even say that the best violists are actually violinists. This begs the question, are violinists better than violists at playing the viola? The complicated thing about this question is, who qualifies as a violist, who qualifies as a violinist? Could you qualify as both? For this video, I'm going to be dividing it up into a few categories, which I'll explain as we go. To start, let's look at violinists who play viola. The first musician I'm going to talk about in this category is Maxim Van Groff, one of the most prolific violin soloists of our time. In this recording of his Sibelius Violin Concerto, listen to his tone quality and vibrato. Van Groff's violin playing is as juicy as it comes. He has a wider vibrato than most violinists, and his thick tone projects really well. These attributes also happen to fit well with viola playing, as we can hear in this recording of his Welton Viola Concerto. Sounds really good, right? Well, if you thought so, then you're in good company because he actually won a Grammy for this recording in 2004. He doesn't even have to change his violin technique much to play viola. It's almost as if he's playing violin on the viola. What would it sound like if someone played viola on the viola? Let's listen to the recording of Antoine Temestit, a full-time viola soloist, playing the same passage from the Welton Concerto. It's completely different. While Temestit still projects well enough to be heard, his sound fades more in and out of the orchestra, compared to how Van Groff sustains his sound as loud as possible in a virtuosic fashion. This allowed Temestit to create curvier, broader sounds compared to a linear one. This makes more of an introspective mood, which I think fits the viola's character more. Van Groff definitely wasn't the first big-name violinist to dabble in viola. Probably his most notable predecessor was Pinchas Zukerman. In this recording of Brahms' two songs for voice, viola, and piano, listen to how he uses vibrato. Although he sounds excellent, his vibrato makes it obvious that his first instrument is actually violin. He uses vibrato on pretty much every note, and it's always fast. Let's compare this to Amihai Gross, principal of the Berlin Philharmonic, playing the same piece. Gross uses vibrato more sparingly than Zukerman. When he does, it's slower and wider. This is because the viola is more resonant than the violin. In order to get more of that resonance, you need to use less vibrato. You can also get more colors that way. Viola strings vibrate slower than violin strings, so you also need to use slower and wider vibrato. Although Zukerman does use a wider vibrato and more bow variation than he probably would use on violin, he's still a violinist playing the viola. To make an analogy out of this, let's say you're from Mars, and you go to Earth, and you find a restaurant called Martian cuisine. You go in and they've decorated really nicely to look like it's authentic. They even have most of the dishes you would see on a real Martian menu. You order their Martian mash. It's one of the best Martian mash you've ever had in your life. But a few details and spices give away that it's not real Martian mash. It's not the same as the Martian mash back home. So you wouldn't say it's the best Martian mash ever, although it's still very good. Zukerman is like an excellent Earth chef who went to Mars, did all his research, and cooks very well, but at the end of the day, he's just not a native Martian. He did pass on his love of playing to all of his students, one of which ended up being more in the middle of the violin-viola spectrum. Meet Julian Ratchlin. Julian Ratchlin carried on his teacher's tradition of playing both instruments as a soloist, but his playing is much different than that of his teacher. Listen to this recording of a Schubert Arpeggione Sonata. I wouldn't be able to guess that he's a violinist based on just this performance. He doesn't use too much vibrato, and he gets a lot of good viola resonance. However, knowing that he's a violinist, if we compare his bow arm to someone like Antoine Tomestet, his bow arm is a little bit less sensitive to the slower resonating viola strings, but he's still middle ground. What I find really interesting about Ratchlin, though, is his violin playing. Ratchlin uses less vibrato than most other violin soloists, and he seems to use equal parts projection and resonance in his sounds. He's one of the rare people that plays both violin and viola on both violin and viola. Let's hear what he has to say about playing both instruments.
Why did I choose the violin? You know, to tell you the truth, but just between you and me, it's not my favorite instrument. Cello is my favorite instrument. I always wanted to be a cellist. Of course I love the violin, but still, cello is my most favorite instrument, and this is why I play viola, because it's the closest I can get to the cello, being a violinist. This is why I'm crazy about viola.
It makes perfect sense. Ratchlin seems to like the viola better because it's closer to the cello. So even though he's a violinist, he's also a violist. It's like his mom was from Earth and his dad was from Mars, and he studied with Zukerman, who knew a ton about Martian cuisine. And now he has a really nice mix of authentic Earth and Martian flavors. My brother, who I mentioned at the beginning of the video, also falls into this category of violinist/violist. Let's listen to him playing the same Brahms piece we heard earlier. His playing, when compared to Zukerman and Gross, is right in the middle, just like Ratchlin. Something he's always said about playing both instruments is the same thing that Ratchlin says in this interview.
For me, I maybe try to compare it to switching languages. I think it's possible also for a violinist to switch to viola and back and forth and back and forth.
This is further reciprocated by British violist Lawrence Power, who says, "I happen to love playing the viola. It's my mother tongue and what I do. But you can speak other languages even if you have an accent." Wait, so he's a violist who also plays the violin? Lawrence Power played the viola since childhood, but now he also plays violin, except, well, let's listen. Granted, this is a Baroque style piece, so naturally there's less vibrato, but the way he draws out as much resonance as possible from the violin is the same way he would play viola. Like he said, it's like he has an accent. Now it's like a Martian decided to cook some Earth food, so he's making a hamburger with Martian spices, which is delicious even though it's obviously Martian. Unfortunately, accents can sometimes end up sounding a bit clumsy, and that brings me to the last musician that's featured in today's video, me. So a few months ago I was making this video comparing violin and viola pieces played on both violin and viola. So I was playing violin. I tried to make my vibrato a bit narrower, but it still ended up sounding unusually wide for the violin. I also wasn't used to the close contact point on the violin, so I had trouble sustaining my sound. It just goes to show that playing both instruments is really difficult to do. So even though I've labeled some people in this video as being more one way or another on the spectrum of violinistic versus violistic viola playing, that's a bit of a mouthful, they're all much better musicians than I am. I'm like an amateur Martian chef who was actually born on Earth, but I realized I didn't fit in there, so I moved back to Mars and tried to break my Earth cooking habits. Now when I do still cook Earth food, it's okay. but so many people do it better, so I just stick to Martian food. I have one final category to address, and that's pre-college violinists and violists. I started playing violin when I was 3 years old, and I started playing viola as a side instrument when I was 12. Getting a good sound on a viola is much harder than getting a good sound on a violin, but I was used to that sound of a violin, so I adjusted my technique and followed my ear until I got the same sound on a viola. And then when I played, people would always say that I made the viola sound like a violin. This is why, at the pre-college level, violinists who can figure out how to apply their violin skills to viola often have a lot of success right away. It's like they're getting pretty good at cooking earth food at their earth school where no one really knows much about Martian food, so they try cooking Martian food the same way they would cook earth food, and people think that it tastes great because it tastes just like earth food. However, the ethnic Martian students at their school will know that it's not authentic, even if they're too polite to say anything. It doesn't matter if you're a violinist who can play the viola more accurately than violists if you can't bring out the viola's true character. In an ensemble, the viola needs to balance out the violin's dramatic, sweet, heroic character, and the cello's upstanding, bold character. In an ensemble, the viola's character is empathetic and perceptive, and it serves as mediator. You need some violists to bring the ensemble together, no matter what its size is. If you had a bunch of violinists playing viola, it would be a lopsided character. If you're a violist in an orchestra, and a violinist waltzes in and starts acting like they're better than you, remember that in the viola section, it's not about the notes you hit or miss. It's about bringing out your instrument's voice. And that brings me to my final answer to this video's question. Are violinists better than violists at playing the viola? No. While violinists can have equal or superior technical skill compared to violists, bringing out the viola's character is an entirely different skill. And this applies on all levels from youth orchestras to world-class soloists. I do want to clarify though, that just because someone who plays viola sounds more like a violinist, that doesn't mean they're bad at viola. In the cases of Maxim Van Groff and Pinchas Zukerman, they both brought excellent musicianship to their viola playing and popularized the viola and its repertoire. It's also evident that they both really did love playing viola.
Viola is a true discovery to me. Every day I'm more and more in love with this instrument. It's a truly miracle partnership, viola and myself. I would never think that I would get so close to the instrument.
When violinists play viola and violists play violin, it's a sort of cross-pollination that everybody gains from. In fact, I would encourage every violinist to try playing viola in a string quartet at least once. It'll make you a much better musician. It is still important to make that distinction between who's a violinist and who's a violist though. Otherwise it takes away our identity as violists. Rather than being the orchestral mediators with our own personality traits, we'd be just the ones that take over the roles that the violinists didn't want. It also wouldn't be good for viola soloists. Why hire a viola soloist when you could just hire a violin soloist to play viola? In the end, you would be sacrificing that authentic viola character. And that character is the key reason why violinists are not better than violists at playing viola. That's going to be it for this video. Sergey has been keeping me company, and if you are wondering, he is indeed named after Rachmaninoff. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and I hope you learned something. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button down below and subscribe if you want to see more viola content. Until next time, Viola Gang, Viola King out.